Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm Josh Goding, sitting here with my friend Tyler Smith, fellow movie buff and Hollywood personality. And today we're talking about one of our favorite sci-fi films, Blade Runner, 1982 film by Ridley Scott.
Yeah, my favorite science fiction film of all time, and I consider the best science fiction film of all time. And it took the mantle away from 2001 for me, which says a lot about the movie. It's like, until I saw Blade Runner, I didn't think any movie could beat 2001.
2001
as the best science fiction movie in my opinion.
Sci-fi movie.
Of all time. And it's interesting because when I saw the film, I saw it in the theater when it came out when I was a teenager, and people asked me afterwards. They asked me my opinion, what I thought of the film, and I said, the movie's got a couple problems. I like the voiceover. A lot of people don't like it. The happy ending at the end doesn't quite work. I mentioned a couple of things in there that I consider to be problems. But having said that, like I could see the steel cables in some of the spinner scenes, I said, but having said that, having mentioned what the problems are in this movie, I said, I think it's the best science fiction movie that's ever been made. And I think it's going to be a long time before we see anything that's better. What more of an endorsement can I give to a movie,
I'm remembering now how, well, I'm from the home video era or whatever, I guess. So my first exposure to Blade Runner was on VHS, and it was the
that's where most people found it.
Theatrical cut with the cables left in, of course, and the clunky voiceover and what they call the sappy ending, I guess.
The super happy ending.
Super happy ending.
Or sappy ending, yeah.
But still, for me, it really worked. I mean, that was the only version of Blade Runner I knew until, I guess, the 90s when this director's cut came out and some of these other ideas that we'll get into later. But also, that year was really big for sci-fi. I was reading that happened to be the same year that E.T. was out.
Yeah, the Cat People, Conan the Barbarian, it was a very busy.
Poltergeist.
Poltergeist.
Tron.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Little movie called The Wrath of Khan.
Sorry, it was a thing of, like they say in advertising, trying to break through the back noise. You're trying to break out of all the other stuff that's like it at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because ultimately Blade Runner did win. Most people have forgotten E.T. by now for the most part. I mean, it still has a cult following. Great film. Excellent movie, 10 times better than Close Encounters of the Third Kind, in my opinion. I give both movies an A.
Okay.
Very good movie E.T. is, don't get me wrong, but it's a sweet little kiddies movie, ultimately. Whereas Blade Runner's an adult movie with adult issues. I mean, don't get me wrong, E.T. is an excellent film. It's one of my all-time favorites. But the thing is I have to consider as an art film, from character development, story, writing, everything else like that. It's like I got to give it to Blade Runner for being a much better movie than E.T. As fantastical a film as it is. But the thing is Blade Runner, there are so many real issues that are so important. What does it mean to be human? And if there are artificial humans, how human are they? How different are they? And since they're different than us, that helps to define how we are human. There's so many issues.
So it's sci-fi in the truest sense.
It's a sci-fi of ideas. It's a sci-fi of character development. And science fiction, ultimately what it does is it says what technology might affect the world and the universe that we live in.
Okay.
That's in a nutshell what science fiction is about.
And also the metaphor of the future actually being representative of the present.
Yeah.
And so the pretend future issues that we're addressing in a sci-fi film are actually a reflection of
what's going on now
today. And
well, it's interesting because George Orwell's 1984 was written in 1948. He just switched the letters around.
Okay.
So it was really what he saw, the direction things were going in his day, was what he was writing about. But he wasn't so much trying to predict the future as he was just saying, this is what I see going on now. This is the direction things are going.
We'll talk a little bit about some of the Orwellian nature of
Well, in Blade Runner, there are Orwellian elements very clearly weaved into the story. The whole idea, remember the eye in George Orwell's 1984, Big Brother's Watching You?
Right,
the
opening
the
shot
eye at the
Blade
beginning
Runner.
of Blade Runner? That's the whole Orwellian.
Where the cityscape is reflected in the eye, and then we cut to the inside where there's the scientist or whatever who's going to do the test.
Yeah, and there are references to eyes all throughout that, like when Roy Batty puts up the two eyes. And
eyes are big, yeah.
Yeah, the big eyes, and does his Chinese voice.
When they're looking for Tyrell, I guess, and they go to the cybernetic, genetic designer of eyes.
Oh yeah, he says, "I make your eyes," and he says, "Chew, if you could only see what I've seen with your eyes." Oh, wow.
And then, this idea of the eye being the window to the soul, and, and what is the nature of humanity in terms of artificial intelligence.
And it deals with the Hamlet issue of death, the unknown of death, and people's fear of death, but and when you get close to death, you become, in a strange way, more alive because you appreciate life even more.
And we'll get to that.
Oh,
That's,
I mean,
penultimate scene. But let's back up a little bit. It's been said that Blade Runner is a very accurate prediction of the future, or maybe even now the near future.
Mark Kermode, did a documentary about Blade Runner that I saw on YouTube recently.
Okay.
And they were saying in the documentary, man, Los Angeles, we're getting close to 2019 when Blade Runner said.
Right.
They said, man, Los Angeles is looking more and more like Blade Runner every day.
So we
have this huge gap between the very rich and the very poor. And you have, in Blade Runner, you have all these homeless, out of work people just running around the streets everywhere.
Right.
And now you're seeing that happen in Los Angeles, and boy, it's frightening.
So we have a setting of a polluted, overcast, rainy city. We presume there's some kind of global warming going on.
Well, not just that, but the environment's being trashed due to various pollution problems that are being created, not just global warming. Global warming is part of the problem.
All this is just kind of, it's understated, it's in the background, you can just feel the textures of this world where there's...
Without coming out and spelling it out,
we're told
that's what I love, the subtlety of it.
There's no animals maybe left, like a real snake would be
They're not real animals, they're all artificial animals.
Right. Where there's one line where, if I could afford a real snake, do you think
I'd be working in a place like this?
Right.
There are very few real animals, they kind of hint at that,
right.
They're hard to come by,
So, and then also some sort of a globalization where there's a lot of Asian motifs, or just sort of
well,
this...
not just that, but there's Egyptians, there's Arabs, there's Asians, there's everything, Hispanic, Gaff's Hispanic, Japanese, Chinese, it's all just crowded into one small space. One of the things I saw in the documentary, Dangerous Days, which I wanted to mention a little bit.
Great, 2007.
It's a documentary that the people who made Blade Runner made about the film.
Okay.
Whereas Mark Kermode did his own thing separately. But these are the actual filmmakers making their own documentary about it years later.
Okay.
Where they have the actual cast members talking about it, and the people working on it, like Dougie Trumbull. And, but the thing was this woman who was a critic who saw the film, she said, I saw the movie, and I just didn't get it, when she was watching the movie, she say this, whatever they're saying in this movie,
didn't get Blade Runner.
She didn't get Blade Runner. She's saying, she's saying to herself, I was watching this movie, I didn't get it. And then she walks out into Times Square, and she sees Asians, Hispanics, whites, all these different groups all crammed together in one small space. And she says, oh my God, I got it. This is what's happening.
So this movie is a prediction of a near future, or a reflection of what we're just about to enter.
Well, it's funny because in the documentary about Mark Kermode, they said, man, it's like someone had gone to 2019 and then come back and written Blade Runner. It's that spooky. Right. It's just that accurate. They're like, the future couldn't be this dystopian. When they were watching it back in 1982, and they're watching it. We're almost 2019 now. And they're like, oh my God, this is just spot on.
Some people talk about an Orwellian, like a portrayal of an Orwellian kind of fascist state.
Yeah.
But what I see is sort of more of an apathetic government that's removed itself, and you have what's left, an amoral, corporate-controlled world where...
I wanted to get a little bit about Philip K. Dick, and this is a good segue for that.
Okay, please do.
Okay, Philip K. Dick... this guy was radically advanced for science fiction writers of the day. Most of them were writing Flash Gordon types of stories.
Almost every other year, a sci-fi movie comes out based on one of his short stories.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing that was unique about Dick was that he was, even amongst the best science fiction writers of his day, he was light years ahead of most of them. Even George Orwell. He left him behind in the dust as a science fiction writer. And the thing that was so unique about Philip K. Dick was he took science fiction seriously as a platform for real issues of what's going on in the world and in the universe. You know, he didn't treat it as a kiddie story.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
there's no gee whiz element.
Yeah,
everything is very understated, and it's more about
it's about ideas. It's about issues that Dick was a very caring person. And, you know, he was disgusted by what he saw going on in the world. And this was his platform to say, hey, guys, wake up. There's some really bad things going on here. You need to wake up and do something about it.
I think one of the things that stands out about PKD's story, novels and short stories, is that he was one of the first to just write matter-of-factly about the future. And his characters were concerned with things like making money. What was their occupation?
Yeah.
And just the sort
of the thing that was interesting
matter
about
of fact.
Philip K. Dick's stories was they were the opposite of Flash Gordon, where the hero is very optimistic, whereas his characters are very world weary people. Who are very broken, damaged people going through a dark, horrible world. Similar to what Dick experienced in his own life. These were not idealist heroes. They were damaged people.
It is a shame I have yet to read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but do you want to talk about some of the parallels of that source material?
Well, it was interesting when they were putting the film together. Was they, back in the 70s, late 70s, when they were putting the film together, they were approaching people to put this movie together. And one of the people they approached said to them, if you're going to do a Philip K. Dick novel, you got to do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. They were bringing him on. They told him, we're going to do a Philip K. Dick novel. They said, that's the one we're doing. And the guy said, great. And he said to him, but you got to do it as Blade Runner, not as Philip K. Dick.
The term Blade Runner apparently
was not in the novel. It was in another science fiction novel, actually.
Okay.
But it was such a cool sounding word that they wanted to use, or two words that they wanted to use it for that.
So if it's like the adaptations that I know, because of the way Dick's writing is, you sort of have to pull out elements, but his works are largely unfilmable, possibly just because of the way that things jump around. And
well, they're unfilmable in terms
narrators.
of, well, a lot of them are unfilmable in the fact that they're short stories. They don't translate well into full movies.
Well, they work better than a full novel.
But most of his best work were actually his short stories.
I agree.
Yeah, and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, as I remember, was a novella.
Okay, yeah.
It wasn't a full
about
story.
150 pages or something like this.
Yeah, about that. Yeah, but it was very well written. But one of the things I thought was funny was a lot of people who saw Blade Runner said this is one of the few cases where they took a great science fiction novel and made an even better movie from it. And a lot of people who were hardcore science fiction fans said, I thought Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was pretty good, but Blade Runner was the next level up from that.
And I think
but the whole idea was Blade Runner was a parallel universe to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep without being Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. It's like, okay, something happened a few years earlier in time, and and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep went in this direction, and there was a time split, and Blade Runner went in this direction. You see what I'm saying? Where J.F. Isidore was J.F. Sebastian. You see what I'm saying? They made differences like that, where there were homages to the original without really being the original.
I think it works very well because Dick's work is primarily concerned with the psyche and things like the nature of identity and
the nature of what's real and what's not real. I mean, Philip K. Dick, I can't praise the guy enough. The guy was just so far ahead of George Orwell, which was one of the best science fiction writers of the day, or anyone else, really. To me, it's like Ray Bradbury wrote from the heart. And Martian Chronicles, I was moved to tears by that. Illustrated Man, deeply moved, by both of those. But, he writes from a feeling level. It's very powerful, but Dick writes from his intellect, and it's also powerful in its own way.
Yes.
And the thing that was unique about Dick was the fact that most science fiction writers of their day were just dealing with the Orwellian idea of, evil government oppressively controlling the people. And Dick's like, no. The government is just puppets of the money men who are the ones who are really calling the shots. So this was a level up even from Orwell. You see what I'm saying? I mean, the guy was a super genius. He was absolutely brilliant. And when he was spot on, which he was several times, like in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep,
he also, well, as time went on, he became a little more unstable, and he was convinced that he was being monitored maybe by the FBI.
Yeah,
and,
he seemed to be falling apart near the end. He had a methamphetamine problem, I know that, and that can cause paranoid behavior.
The paranoia, I think, reflected through his work.
Yeah.
It also echoes in Blade Runner, of course, this idea of. But what I feel in Blade Runner is more the void of any kind of authority. I mean, this is a world on the way out. We have these Zeppelins going over, and we're told, you know, make your future in the off-world colonies. You know.
Yeah. So all the dregs of society are left here on Earth, and all the people who really have anything going for them, most of them, have left long ago. You know, and that's a very dark dystopian idea. So the people that are left here, you know, are the people you don't want to know. You know, they're the misfits. They're the losers. You know, it's interesting because Bill Sanderson, who played J.F. Sebastian in the film, he has Medulla syndrome in real life. Actually.
Newhart fame.
What?
Of Newhart fame.
Yeah. But he has Medulla syndrome in real life, and they wrote that into the script.
That's all right.
Yeah, his glands do age too rapidly, but they put more makeup on him to make it look even worse.
He has a certain look to his skin, or like a pockmark look or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he's in his 20s, but he looks like he's in his 50s. You know, and the thing is that but that idea that he's a genetic engineer. Yet he can't solve his own physical ailments. That's kind of an interesting idea if you think about it.
Create artificial people instead.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking, even though this promise of the Earth off-world colonies is golden, it's probably at least as bad as the American frontier, Old West frontier.
Well, we don't know.
But we're told that they had to create
ambiguous.
A race of slaves because things were bad enough out there that they had to create.
Well, on the very edge of their society, you have to figure it's like the frontier that we knew in the West, where the first year, 50% of them are going to die making this. But after that, when they get the infrastructure there, it's okay to move there. You know, you're fairly safe. But initially, you're taking a huge risk.
Right.
You kind of get that feeling of it, you know, that parallel that the very edge of the frontier, it's pretty bad, but within a few years, you know, it'll probably be reasonably good. And there'll be opportunities there, but it's the first settlers that are the ones taking the huge risks. And those are going to be replicants, you know that, you know, a good chunk of them.
So let's talk about the replicants. The artificial intelligence and it's coming to self-awareness or sentience, that's nothing new in sci-fi. What's different about the replicants in the way that
one of the things
that's
different about the replicants is the whole idea of more human than human. You know, they're so close to us, they're almost identical, but they are a little different. And you see that in the performances of the actors. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting in the story, one of the reasons they wanted Harrison Ford for this movie was because the replicants were the good guys in the film, and the Blade Runners, the system, was the bad guys. And they wanted Harrison Ford, they wanted someone who's good looking, who usually plays the good guys, like Han Solo, you know, or Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Because the audience is going to look at him and it's like, okay, he's the hero again, but he isn't.
So the movie plays against our assumptions.
It plays against expectations. It goes with our expectations and goes against them. You know?
And it plays against a typical structure of, as you say, you know, certain good guys and bad guys and their motivations, especially as we get towards the end of the film and we have more information about the nature of the lifespan of the replicants.
Yeah, they're 4 years. Yeah, 4-year lifespan.
Talk about that. Why was that necessary?
Well, the reason for that was because they were worried that after a while, they would realize they're replicants, they'd realize they'd been screwed by the system, and they'd go after the system. So they didn't want them sticking around for a long period of time to go after them. You see what I'm saying? That was the whole idea behind the short 4-year lifespan as the fail-safe. So they're hoping by the time they figure it out, they'll be close to the end of their 4 years anyway. You know, that's the hope, you know. Or if they aren't, then they just have to dodge them for a few years before they can get them.
And I think it works so well that we're just matter-of-factly and understatedly told that these are escaped prison convicts.
Not convicts, but replicants,
That they were slave laborers, and also that one was actually a sex slave.
Yeah.
And just the sort of matter-of-fact presentation of this inhumane idea, and then to add insult to injury, as soon as they begin to develop their own emotions, we're going to make sure that they die before they become truly
It's hideous if you think about it. And it's a way that technology can be used in an oppressive way. And this is, by definition, a true science fiction story. And it's a story of ideas, a story of character development and plot.
I think it's influenced so many things
The Matrix
that
is a
followed
clear
it.
example. Yeah, cyberpunk look.
Also, I think the critically acclaimed, the 2003 and beyond, the miniseries of Battlestar Galactica remake kind of picked up where
Yeah, Blade Runner
Blade
influence.
Runner, and they even used the term skin job to describe
really?
the Cylons,
Yeah.
the human appearing Cylons, and so it's very influential.
Yeah.
What else? Fans of Blade Runner and being hardcore fans and the sort of the lasting legacy of...
Well, it's interesting because Doug Trumbull said this in the documentary Dangerous Days. He says, these blockbusters come out. He says, I'm not going to name what they are, but they come out summer, they make a ton of money, then bye-bye. People forget them. No one wants to resurrect them. No one wants to talk about them or think about them. He wouldn't name any names, but I will. Batman Returns, to me, is a prime example. Made a ton of money in the summer. Who talks about it now? Who watches it now?
Yeah.
Thinks about it. It's gone, But Blade Runner wasn't a huge hit. This is one of the things I want to talk about. It came out right on the heels of E.T. It was buried by E.T.'s wash, at that time.
Tepid box office reception.
Yeah. And the thing was Blade Runner didn't really take off till people like you saw it on video or cable. It didn't really start to get a following, but it was interesting to me because people who saw Blade Runner, it was one of those things where they either really seemed to love it or they really hated it. But it had a harder core following of fans than E.T. really did, in my opinion. And it's interesting because I looked up on Amazon.
And was the age different of those fans, do you think?
Well, but to some extent, age different, but I think even younger fans really like Blade Runner. But it's like, at the time, people were into happy food, which E.T. was. And then Blade Runner came out, this dystopia thing, and it didn't catch on quite a while. It's like coffee. It's an acquired taste.
Some of the only real critiques I've read of Blade Runner were about people who were sort of waiting for The Empire Strikes Back, and this other movie comes out with Harrison Ford, and it's not Star Wars by a long shot.
Yeah, and I think that was another reason why I initially got a lot of backlash to it, because it wasn't what they expected from Harrison Ford. Because, and that's one of the things, when they put the movie together, they intentionally wanted to have Harrison's character get the crap beat out of him by these replicants. One, to show that these things are tough and resourceful, but also to show this isn't Indiana Jones. This isn't Han Solo. This is a real person who gets punched, and he gets hurt. And it sucks. It's horrible, and that whole scene where he's fighting Leon, and the guy's so much bigger than him, and he throws him into the car, breaks the windshield, on the front, and he says to him, "There's nothing worse than having an itch you can never scratch." And Harrison just says timidly, "Oh, I agree."
I agree. Yeah.
I agree.
That's another thing. The film has the violence of the film.
That's not the tough guy hero that you usually see in the movies. This is like, this guy is kind of cowering before these replicants,
And do you think that speaks to the quality of
the
writing and the dialogue? Because there's a certain economy in the way the things that the characters say to each other. Everything's very matter of fact. But if you look a little deeper, there's a lot of wordplay. There's a lot of double meaning and puns. Tyrell is not an easy man to see when they go to the eye factory to find him, and then later in a scene of extreme violence that traumatized me as a youth and to this day, where he grabs Tyrell by the head and squeezes his eyes out. What do you think about the violence in Blade Runner and
the violence is meant to be ugly, as opposed to be entertaining.
And there's consequences.
That's what pushes it to such a higher level, I think, as a writing as it is a film.
It's not an irresponsible use of violence where there's just these little laser beams coming out and you're shooting
someone
people
gets zapped
that may or may not be a robot, and everything has very little consequence to the violence.
Whereas, it shows violence is very ugly. That's one of the things that works about Blade Runner so well. It shows that violence is very ugly, that hurting people is very horrible, and it doesn't do it, like you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Harrison Ford shoots the guy. You don't see any blood. He just falls to the ground, the swordsman, and everyone laughs, It's entertainment. In that, violence is fun. In this, it's ugly.
This is Harrison Ford's job. He's
a killer.
And he goes to not execute these people, but to retire.
In other words, you retire instead of execute, But that's a throwback to the Orwellian idea of language is designed to deceive rather than communicate,
War is peace, lies equals truth, and so on. Yeah.
Well, the whole thing of freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, big brother, I love you, no one says what they mean. Nothing that is said to you is what it means.
Or the Bureau of Information is in reality the
Bureau of Lies.
Deception.
Yeah, basically, yeah, exactly. But the thing is that's different about Blade Runner from the Orwellian version. There are Orwellian elements in there, but it's the fact that these cops, the people who we were afraid of in George Orwell's 1984, we realize they're just gutless little toadies under the monument. We're just moving them around like pieces on a chessboard. And they have that whole thing with the chessboard, in there, which is what they're doing with the replicants. And I thought that was a nice tie-in, for when Roy Batty meets Tyrell, that they do it through a chessboard. I thought that was very clever. It's subtle, and there's so many things that are subtle, and I love the ambiguity of Blade Runner.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And do you want to get into the different versions?
Yeah.
Well,
it's funny because for me, it's like I really liked all versions of Blade Runner.
Okay.
So
we're starting with the one with the voiceover and the happy ending.
Yeah. But I will say this: the final, there was the director's cut, and then the final director's cut.
This is the one I haven't seen yet. I hear it's available, but it's they're calling it the definitive cut, or you said the final cut?
Yeah, first they came up with the director's cut, then they came up with the final cut.
Now, in the director's cut that I saw, there was a scene with some stock footage of a unicorn, which I thought Ridley Scott might have stolen from his own film.
No, that was made for Blade Runner. But
it looked very similar to footage used in his film.
Well, he
Legend.
but he might have pinched it from that, but that was in the script, just so you know.
So
that was in the original script.
So we have a juxtaposition of his dream, I guess, or maybe a daydream, with this origami unicorn that is made by the character that James Olmos plays.
Gaff.
Gaff, thank you. And so then I was told this suggests that Deckard might be a replicant because he's a unique creature like this unicorn. He may be a replicant that doesn't have. Well,
Gaff knows that Gaff knows his memories, and in his memory he saw a unicorn.
Okay.
That's the whole tie-in where he's saying to him when he leaves that paper unicorn at the end, I know you're a replicant.
Do you think that that's a superior version, this idea that, because I know we have the revelation that Sean Young's character, Rachel, is a replicant, and that she might be unique. She might actually have a full life, or we don't know what the future holds because she doesn't have an expiration date of 4 years. Does it add something to have the mystery that Deckard himself might also be a replicant?
Well,
I felt that it was a little
Philip K. Dick revealed that, it's interesting because Deckard was a replicant. He revealed that.
Androids.
In Blade Runner.
Okay.
But he wasn't in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. He wasn't an android.
Okay.
But in the book, they don't use the word replicant. That was just in the movie. And the word skin job wasn't in the book either.
Oh.
That's slang from the movie also, which is slang for replicant.
But
they take a skin cell from the person they want, and then they make another one.
In Androids?
No, in Blade Runner.
Okay.
But the thing is tit job is a slang for a female replicant.
Skin jobs and tit jobs.
Yeah, tit jobs. Yeah. But the thing is you look at Blade Runner. It's like, there's a lot of stuff you don't really get explained to you in the movie, but the depth that these people thought it out when they made this film, the deep background in it. It's like a lot of the artwork in Blade Runner you didn't even see. Because it was such deep background, you didn't really.
Let's talk about want to get into visual effects a little bit?
The visuals of Blade Runner, I think, are the best of any movie ever, period. Forget science fiction. Any movie, period. The visuals in this movie beat out even 2001 or any other movie I think you can name ever.
Okay.
I mean, visually, it's really
we're talking
quite
about model photography that would have been with motion-controlled cameras.
Yeah. And let's remember, this is pre-CGI.
And blue screen junk mats that would have been for the optical superimpositions that would have.
And in-camera models that they used with smoke to film.
Self-lighting models.
Yeah.
This giant, presumably giant model of self-lighting Los Angeles of the future with smoke and a million LEDs or something.
Yeah.
And I think the vision that it creates today is it's still superior than some of the Lucas rehashes that have come out.
I look at the special effects of Blade Runner, and they're still hands down absolutely my favorite. And the reason that they are is because there's something about models that you shoot in camera that just grabs me, you know.
Yeah.
It just looks real, emotionally to my heart. You know, it's just like I connect with it. You know, whereas the CGI stuff, my heart just kind of goes, it's phony.
There isn't really something there at all. I mean, with these models, you're starting off with a photographic element that's then composited into a larger scene, matte painting or something. But your eye is very good, I think, at picking up fakeness. Yeah. And so it works on a subconscious
level. But emotionally, it like clicks to me, this is real. You know, it's like that whole thing of Los Angeles. That took a lot of guts to spend all that time to do an in-camera model shot, you know, and hope that it worked, you know, with the smoke.
Yeah.
Because getting the smoke to work right, because you a lot of times when you shoot a shot like that, you have to shoot it 1 second per frame to have enough light for it, and the smoke changes, and that's really tricky to match that and make it work. But Doug Trumbull did. He got high-end smoke detectors to add more smoke, so he was able to control it. But controlling something like that is difficult, to say the least.
Trumbull had a pretty full resume going into this, right?
Doug Trumbull. Oh yeah, you know, I would say, if you had to list the people who've had the biggest influence on science fiction movies in, you know, the last 100 years, I think George Lucas would be number 1 and Doug Trumbull would be number 2.
So he was visual effects for 2001, Blade Runner, Alien?
Well, he did both the first 3 Star Wars films and Alien, even though he wasn't credited on those films.
Okay.
But he was paid to work on them.
And also involved with Silent Running.
Yes, he did the special effects in that, and he directed it, and he was in the early story meetings of that film even, when they were putting together the story. So he was in that one right from the very first days of the production. You know, he wasn't, you know, he was originally, Doug Trumbull, most people don't know this, but he was originally slotted to do Alien. Mm-hmm. But he fell out of favor with Hollywood, and it went to Ridley Scott instead. But, you know, that was also another project he was on with Dan O'Bannon in the very early days of it, you know. And they wanted Doug Trumbull, originally they wanted Doug Trumbull was slotted to direct that. And he was heartbroken. You know, I was just absolutely heartbroken when
slotted to direct
Alien.
Alien, okay.
You know, he was just absolutely devastated when it went to Ridley Scott instead.
He was more of a visual effects guy, right? That might have been one of his first directing jobs if Trumbull had gotten it. Or?
Yeah, that would have been his second one, actually.
Okay.
Alien would have been, yeah. You know, he was just heartbroken when it went to Ridley Scott instead, you know. It's funny because he told Starlog magazine that, and they didn't believe him. And then they heard out from other sources, no, he was originally wanted to direct. He was originally slotted to direct that. Yeah.
Well, was his official title visual effects supervisor?
No, director.
I mean, sorry, for Blade Runner.
He was visual effects supervisor for Blade Runner. Yeah.
So I think, you know, what they created, and I don't know if ILM was involved, or am I just fishing?
I think they were. I'm guessing that they were. Yeah. But they were actually. They had to have been because they used the model from Star Wars of the Millennium Falcon as one of the buildings, the background for Blade Runner. So they must have been involved.
It's a nice Easter egg.
Yeah, a little thing.
Can you see it? Do you know?
Well, I could point it out to you in the film, but someone had to point it out to me before I could spot it.
But I think, you know, what's created by Trumbull and his team is a situation where this model, or the cityscape of Los Angeles of 2019, it is one of the strongest characters in the movie. It's actually a character.
Kind of like in Alien, where the Nostromo ship is a character in the film. You know, the city of Los Angeles is a character in the movie. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a very interesting character in that. You know,
it draws you in and keeps you in the world. It does so much to create the universe of Blade Runner without a character having to say a single word of exposition. It's just perfect, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that was the whole idea of before they did Blade Runner, they sat everyone down to watch The Big Sleep, actually, and that was one of the big influences on that film. If you watch The Big Sleep first and watch Blade Runner second,
you're talking about Howard Hawks' 1946 The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart.
And Laura Bacall, absolutely, yeah. We're not talking about the Robert Mitchum remake, you know.
Talk about that a little bit. It's a detective. It's a hard-boiled noir film.
Yeah. Well, the thing is if you look at both movies, they're both very dark and rainy. You know, they're dark stories with a dark setting and dark visuals.
Okay.
You know, and that's the whole film noir thing. And also in Blade Runner, they intentionally went for a 40s futuristic look. Like a 40s style's coming back, you know, after all these years.
So we have the high
but
collars,
it's a futuristic 40s.
the 40s hair and the cigarette holders.
Yeah.
The tough guy attitude
Yeah.
by Deckard, and sort of the tough love scene. Might be something similar you'd expect to see in a Bogart film.
Yeah.
So I think it's tone perfect. You know,
Yeah.
I think that also sets Blade Runner apart from other sci-fi films. It's one of the only noir subgenre movies that I can think of in the sci-fi.
Probably the only one.
Yeah.
That's it, you know. But it worked. You know, it absolutely worked. And the visuals of Blade Runner with the lights, the streams of lights, you know, coming through with the smoke that they have all the way through that.
And
one of the
constant
things,
drizzle sort of.
oh yeah, and I like the whole. To me, one of the things that was so genius about that film is how they disguise the exposition through advertising in the movie. I thought that was just absolute genius.
Good point.
You know, the whole thing of the blimp floating around, you know, and talking about off-world, you know.
There was the the motif of the geisha, the futuristic geisha,
Yeah.
and I had read that they're taking a pill which might have been intended to be birth control. There was this idea of keeping the population down on Earth, and that might have been something from the source material. But I don't. Do you know anything about that?
No,
Person putting this thing in their mouth over and over. I mean, it might have just been a commercial billboard, but I had read somewhere there was.
Well,
this
it might
tie-in.
have been that, but I mean, it's been a, you know, I don't know everything there is to know about the film.
If you don't, who does?
Well, you know, it's like the whole story when they put, you know, the Apollo program together. They had so many scientists and different people working on this, you know, that no one person knew everything that was going on by any stretch of the imagination. Everyone did their department, but no one was the overall expert, you know.
I meant to ask you when we were talking about the different versions and the idea of Deckard as a replicant.
Yeah.
So this one that I haven't seen, this director's definitive final cut, is that different than the other final cut that I saw?
Well, they have more. The later cuts have a few more clues.
Okay.
That Deckard's a replicant, you know, and one of the clues is very subtle. He's got all these photos in front of his piano. You know, replicants keep photos of their past that's not real.
Right.
You know, and they don't know it's not real.
And that's one of the clues that he finds a replicant is
that he is a
keeping
replicant.
Photo. Okay.
Yeah, but it's also the unicorn scene is the other really big clue.
Okay.
You know, because that scene doesn't make sense in the first version where you see the unicorn there and he smiles and it's like, huh?
Yeah. And then I was told, you know, this was supposed to mean this, and I just thought, okay.
But with the unicorn scene added in, it ties Gaff together. Gaff saying, "I know you're a replicant. I know what your memories are."
I don't remember that line. So that's the...
No, the line's not in there.
Okay.
But that's what he's saying by leaving the little mini unicorn paper thing in there. I know you're a replicant because I know what your memories are, and I know about the unicorn.
Where in the theatrical cut, we just think that, well, he's been in his apartment, he could have hurt them, but he's decided to let them go.
Yeah, I read it differently when I saw the movie, the first version. You know, when he leaves that, it's like, okay, he leaves these little paper figures everywhere. So just the unicorn there is like, he left the unicorn to let...
So like, you got lucky.
Let you know, you got lucky this time. I saw you and I left.
Maybe.
It's just a little calling card, you know? But I read it differently. He's saying, okay, you got lucky, but he's also saying, I know you're a replicant, Deckard.
Yeah.
You know, I know about the unicorn. You know, you never told me that.
And then does it end with just the elevator closing?
Yeah, they're closing and they just roll the
Goes
credits.
to dark.
Which I thought was a much better ending than the super happy ending, you know?
Yeah, the shot of the helicopter shot of the rolling hills in the theatrical version.
It didn't really quite work for me.
I guess I wondered, it does give a sense of freedom after the claustrophobia of the city, but I wondered if it didn't feel that it fit.
Yeah, it didn't really fit with the overall theme. It's like, okay, everything we've told you about this utopia world, it's not true. Everything's wonderful as soon as you get away from Los Angeles.
I was going to say, too, that in the defense of the voiceover, I'm not a huge fan of voiceover in films, but as a noir pick,
yeah, it kind of worked
it did
for me.
Fit,
you know,
this
I did like it.
voiceover of this tough guy.
Yeah, well, it also helps to flush out what the character's thinking, what he's going through. And my main thing on voiceover is I tell people, if you're going to do voiceover, you got to do it within the first 20 pages and establish it.
Yeah.
You know. But if you bring it in later, it just really seems awkward.
And
you know, it's like,
Ford
but if you
might
bring it in at the beginning, you know, it the audience will accept it more.
If you have to force feed exposition, you better get it over quick.
Well, no, it's not necessarily that, but you need to introduce it early in the film, to let them know, okay, we're using voiceover, and you need to accept that convention, because if it comes along later, it's like, it's like an Alien. They wanted to, for that scene where they've just, what's his name, Ash is a robot.
Okay.
They've talked with him and they've unplugged him. They wanted to bring what Yafat Kodo Parker was thinking at that point was, this thing's killed my entire crew in about 24 hours, and I got 2 women backing me up. I am screwed. That's what he was thinking in his head. That's what he was told to think in that scene. But they didn't put a voiceover in it.
Yeah.
Because it was too late in the film and it would just been too clunky.
Yeah.
But that's what he was thinking at that moment.
And do I detect, a hint of either resentment or indifference in Ford's delivery? Maybe do you think that?
Well, I think
were there problems with that?
I thought that his delivery was he was a world-weary person.
Okay.
And people thought, oh, he doesn't like doing the voiceover. No, he doesn't like where he is. I thought the delivery was appropriate. It was in character. I thought it worked, But a lot of people, I think, read it the wrong way. Oh, I have to do this voiceover, and I'm not real happy about it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Sort of like Costner in Dances with Wolves. That's what I think of that one.
But the thing was I thought the voiceover worked. I thought the voiceover was appropriate. But at the end, that scene, where he says, I don't know why he saved my life, that was clunky.
That hurt. That was painful. I didn't need it. It ruined a sublime moment.
I thought, it's
Tears in the
interesting because
Rain.
the director of Shawshank Redemption, he saw that film, and he was like, I just saw what I consider to be the best scene in any movie in all cinema history.
You're talking about what
the
sometimes
scene
known
with
as
Deckard,
the Tears in the Rain
speech, yeah.
So what is the plot of that scene, or what's the structure of that scene, and what?
Yeah,
what
well,
is
the
it all
gist
about?
of it is that he knows that he only has minutes left to live, and he spares Deckard's life.
Roy Batty, played by Rutger Hauer.
Yeah. And this is his sworn enemy that he saves, and the whole thing of time to die. I don't know why he saved my life. I suppose in those last few moments, he valued life more than he ever had. The director of Shawshank Redemption, yes, I got that.
At a wah.
It's one of those moments where you just watch a scene you really love, and it's like someone just runs up to you and kicks you in the balls as hard as they can.
It was creaky. Yeah, it was
it's like, ow!
So let's, a version
I'm
that
glad
doesn't
they
have
took that out, because it works better without it in. It's like, yes, we got that,
So in the scene, we see that Roy Batty's dying, and he was about to murder
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford very easily. He could have just punched right through his body.
Or he could have just let him fall to the ground.
Or let him fall. Instead, he saves him and
Yeah.
pulls him up onto the roof and spends his few final moments just sort of poetically reflecting on some of the things that he's seen in his life.
But it's interesting because before that, they were sworn enemies. Mm-hmm. But at that moment, it's like he's his best friend.
Yeah.
And that's... and that was the whole point. The replicants aren't the bad guys. They're capable of empathy. They're capable of compassion.
Because I think this scene represents the heart of the film in terms of its humanity and sparing him and talking about how precious life is and how little time he has left and some of the things he's seen.
And how all of us never know how much time we have. Mm-hmm.
That scene stood out for me, and I still think of today the way that it made me feel, the way that it made me reflect on my own mortality, my own humanity. If a science fiction movie can do that, you really know you've got something.
Well, you have to understand something.
Here.
The filmmakers who made this movie, their philosophy, this is a lot of the same people that worked on Alien, Silent Running, and several others. And their philosophy is, we don't make science fiction movies. We make dramas that are set in a science fiction backdrop. It's like, if the drama's not there, why are we shooting this?
The science fiction, or the futuristic part just becomes, as you say, just the setting for a story that's really relevant to what's going on today.
What's going on throughout all of humanity for all time,
What happened then to science fiction after, and the trend of going back to movies that were more with the gee whiz, more of an action vein?
Well, the thing was, I have to say this. You know, I was a huge fan of Starlog magazine. I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I've read several science fiction novels. I've written some science fiction short stories. And, you know, I got to tell you, after Blade Runner came out, I was so blown away by the film that I just stopped reading Starlog magazine. And the reason was because I had to compare everything that came out after this to Blade Runner, and it just didn't stack up even close. You know,
so we had what followed was a few decades of fluff,
really
relative
mediocre, fluffy stuff. Yeah, and I, you know, it was just painful for me. I just couldn't subscribe to Starlog magazine anymore, and I love Starlog magazine. But it was just. I'm sorry, guys. There's just after this, I just don't see anything that comes even close. You know.
And thank goodness from 2000 on, I think has been a better time for science fiction.
Well, science fiction has started to pick up.
We're seeing a
Children
reemergence.
of Men was a story of ideas. You know, Moon, very good science fiction movie. You know, both of those films. Children of Men, I'd give it an A-. Moon, I think I'd also give an A- too. You know, I mean, you know, and I don't hand out A-minuses easily.
Even though it was, in a sense, a greatest hits kind of collection of sci-fi motifs that works in a new way, where sort of the human angst of an industrialized society and the human toll that this futuristic vision actually takes.
Yeah.
The suffering that needs to happen for this vision of the future.
For progress. And let's just hope progress is progressing in the right direction. You know, that's the whole thing. You know,
and I would add,
theme is in there. You know,
I would add District 9 to that sort of trinity there too, where I think that also is a.
Yeah, that was an ideas-oriented science fiction story, very gutsy.
A portrayal of
which I still haven't seen yet, but you gave me a copy.
Yes.
And I will watch. You know?
To discussing that with you. What about the idea of Blade Runner as an early iteration of cyberpunk? And I'm not too familiar with necessarily the subgenres of cyberpunk.
Well, the thing was they say, a lot of people say Blade Runner was the first cyberpunk film. You know, where it took the punk look and combined it with science fiction.
Right.
You know, and you know, Matrix that came out later and other Johnny Mnemonic, other things that came out, you know, borrowed heavily from the whole Blade Runner look and feel. And if you look at, you know, films that come out after that, you know, you can see the Blade Runner footprint on it.
Yeah.
You know,
it was kind of interesting that year too. You had Tron, which was also a sort of commercial flop, I believe. And
I like that one, but not a great film.
It's not, and it's maybe not certainly not the lasting cult classic that Blade Runner is. But it had the idea of a virtuality,
a virtual world,
and it had the cyber maybe without the punk.
Well, Tron was actually the thing I say to people. The kindest thing I can say about Tron was it just had barely enough plot to hold it together, but it had enough plot to where I could enjoy it, you know, and I didn't feel ripped off. But the main thing that had going for it was it had very good special effects, and some of those scenes were absolutely cutting edge, but they worked story-wise with the special effects, and that's what made them work, because special effects without a story just falls on its face, you know, and that whole light cycles.
Light cycles.
Yeah. My God, was that good? I still get goosebumps
the first time we saw
that. I still get goosebumps watching that to this day, and
even
thinking about
reflecting on it looked different to me then than it does now. But reflecting on the polygonal graphics of the day, which I think were actually just hand-drawn animation.
No, they were computer animation, I believe.
I know they definitely bought some for the movie, but there wasn't as much as
but I think that some of it was probably hand-drawn too. Yeah, but you know, knowing Disney at that time, but that but the other thing that Tron really had going for it was it had some of the best musical score of any movie I've ever seen in my entire life. Absolutely.
That's true. Was that John Williams doing?
No, that wasn't John Williams. That was someone else who had a sex change operation.
Oh. we'll have to maybe revisit Tron in some other format.
I actually had the music from Tron as a cassette tape that I'd play it all the time when I was in high school.
I remember
liked it so much.
The synthesizer sounding stingers and
but the music in it I thought was just some of the best of any cinema movie I've ever seen. You know,
I guess we better get back to Blade Runner. But how about
Yeah.
the music, the Vangelis score in Blade Runner?
Oh, I thought it was absolute. To me, all I can say about Blade Runner is every element of it just came together to almost absolute perfection. I absolutely loved the score, and I loved how they combined the Vangelis with kind of a jazz hybrid to it. You see what I'm saying? To bring
like
the old and the new together.
A synth sax is what I'm hearing.
A saxophone, in the background in a jazz tone with the the synthesizer sound.
Yeah.
Complementing each other. I was listening to that. I was like, wow.
And also as a contrast to Tron, let's just touch on the tech in Blade Runner.
Yeah.
The sort of exemplary scene, I think, is the enhance scene or the Photoshop scene where he's got the photo.
Oh yeah, he's moving it around.
He's giving voice commands to the computer to enhance.
Yeah.
And that's been highly imitated and also highly parodied.
No one did that before. That was very cutting edge.
And this idea of zoom in and enhance, and so that he's able to find a clue, a la blow up.
Just through a photo that he manipulates through a computer.
So possibly a nod to Antonioni's Blow Up, which is also has a similar scene and it questions the nature of reality, but that's maybe a subtle nod. But just the way the tech is represented is so matter of fact and just kind of clunky. It appears to be something that's maybe 10 years old and sort of built up on an earlier version of itself. It's not a sleek, beautiful tech. It's similar to something more industrial and utilitarian, like we might have seen in Star Wars or Alien.
Well, yeah, it has a lived-in universe to Blade Runner.
Lived-in,
kind of a grungy, run-down tech.
Covered with soot or something.
Yeah, and that's what I liked about it. This is a throwaway world. Or it's become the throwaway world. We're going to the colonies now, so we're not really that concerned with this planet.
It doesn't matter. Yeah,
it doesn't matter that much.
And the people on the planet, like J.F. Sebastian, when we visit his flat, he appears to have an entire, what used to be an office building downtown. He has the entire thing to himself. Yeah.
Well, the thing was they had areas that were cordoned off around the pyramids where the Tyrell Corporation was. This wasn't clear in the movie. But that's why the whole line, this area is closed to ground traffic.
Say that again? With the
they had areas that were cordoned off away from the rest of the public that they couldn't go to around the pyramids where the Tyrell Corporation was.
So we see this sort of corporate city-state.
Yeah, where they have such control.
A plutocracy, maybe, where the only power, money talks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the whole idea. He was close to Tyrell Corporation. And there were parts of the city that were just reserved for people who worked for Tyrell Corporation. Now, you could walk in and out of there. There wasn't a gate or a fence, but you might get, you might get shooed out of there once you're in there. You're like where Harrison Ford's in that area, and the cop comes up to him. The spinner says, "What are you doing here? This area is closed to ground traffic. I'm working.
Okay.
What are you doing? I'm arresting you. That's what I'm doing." Bleckert. My name's Bleckert. I'm a Blade Runner. Gives a serial number.
Yep.
He's like, "Okay, it checks out. You're allowed in here. You're a cop."
Right.
Have a better one. The spinner flies off. But that was subtle. But you have to think about it. You have to add it together. What's going on there? Why is only Sebastian and these people allowed in this area? And that was the whole point, that they had cordoned off certain parts of the city that only members of Tyrell Corporation were really allowed to live there. And if you did go there, you would get booted out. You see what I'm saying? But it wasn't illegal for you to walk in it per se.
And so when we do get into the Tyrell compound, we see a lavish room, a nicely decorated office room with a beautiful window, and that's can be shaded in or polarized with a voice command, and a world of luxury that probably only the very
Well, everyone
rich,
else is living this poverty and squalor,
sleeping in piles of newspaper, like we see the replicant.
Daryl Hannah's character.
Daryl Hannah does.
Yeah, I will say this, the actors who played the replicants, they played it, they gave a performance like I'd never seen any of them do in any other movie. Because they were told, you're replicants, you're not humans. You got to be a little different. That comes across, It's subtle, but it's there, But they don't overplay it either, But it's the whole scene where Roy Batty and Daryl Hannah are together. There's just so much layering going on in that. They're lovers. They're in love with each other. But at the same time, the replicants, they feel this sense of superiority over real humans. That comes across. It's subtle, but it's there.
And also
they're super cool. In their attitude.
The earned resentment that would be
of
felt
the humans,
by,
who created them. They're creators.
Created them to be slaves, and now are out to ensure that they're destroyed.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, that whole scene where he confronts his maker. And he has the power to kill him. And he does kill him, but still that doesn't really solve his problem. It might make him feel better for the moment,
Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't enhance his life expectancy. And, it's dealing with the Hamlet theme of death and the afterlife. And, is there an afterlife? What does it mean to be alive? And what does it mean to face the fact that you're going to die and die soon?
I was blown away by the subtlety of Rutger Hauer's performance as Roy Batty, and the way
I thought it was by far his best performance of any film I've seen him in.
He's really been overlooked. Since then, he's never had a chance.
He's never gotten a part where I think he really just shined.
Yeah.
I thought his performance, I got this message to Rutger. I thought his performance was twice as good as Harrison Ford's, and I thought Harrison Ford was phenomenal. It's like I wouldn't have traded him for anyone in that film.
Because the character Batty goes from a supernatural murderous rage to being just the most gentle sort of Zen philosophical
Buddha Zen,
at the moment of his death.
master. Oh yeah, very interesting transition.
Let's go of the metaphorical
dove, like his spirit flying up to the heavens.
Yeah.
Powerful stuff. Yeah, and getting that dove to fly in the rain was no small task either. That's on the documentary Dangerous Days. Yeah.
I wonder how many hours they had to leave the camera running to capture that.
Oh well, I think they had to bring in another dove, one that wasn't soaked, to do that. But yeah, making that film was just, it was also a test of endurance too, and it went way over budget. I heard by the time they were done, it was $89 million, and they didn't come close to making their money back. But it wasn't a disaster because it was such a highly respected science fiction film. You got to understand something about the industry, the film business. If you make a movie that's considered a classic and it loses money, that's not a strike against you. Quite the contrary. It's like you were just too far ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and in the years that have elapsed since 1982, out of all the movies that came out that year, as we discussed, this one really above all has remained this enduring classic.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's
and still has not been not only equaled, it hasn't even been halved.
Yeah.
We haven't seen a movie even half as good as this one.
And somehow, despite its many enigmas, it's one of the most accessible movies, I think, to all kinds of
it's interesting
viewers.
To me, because it's the whole idea that, Doug, a lot of the films that he's worked on, they had staying power, even if he wasn't the director. Silent Running, every year that movie was out, it got stronger. Whereas most films, they come out, they're forgotten, like Batman Returns. Bye-bye. He made a lot of money. Okay, see you later. Probably never again. Bye-bye. Off to college for you. They're gone, Whereas Blade Runner, every year, it gets stronger. It's stronger. It's like, I looked up on Amazon.com, and the reviews for Blade Runner that were 5 stars was 631. 4 stars was 98. 3 stars was 35. 2 stars was 19. And 1 star was 40, and most of the reviews that were 1 star and 2 star were complaining about the quality of the DVD, not the movie itself. Mm-hmm.
We also
it's like, wow, the jury is in.
And then, well-known critic Roger Ebert had comments about Blade Runner.
Yeah. Ebert said about it, he thought it was visually stunning, but it lacked any real plot or character development. And I thought he just didn't get it. I think, the movie was so subtle, it was so brilliant that I think it really went over a lot of people's heads.
He did give it credit for being
visually stunning.
Visually, yeah, and that maybe that made up for its other failings. But I wonder if, as time has gone on, if he would revise his.
Well, last I heard, he hasn't. He still doesn't think it's that good of a movie. But, he's very much in a minority opinion now. But they say about Blade Runner fans, the people who are Blade Runner fans, they're hardcore Blade Runner fans, They're not iffy, wishy-washy Blade Runner fans like a lot of the E.T. fans, They're not fanatical about E.T. now. Whereas the people who, when they talk about Blade Runner, they're like, hey, there are real issues in here. I was deeply moved by this. This is powerful stuff.
Well, thanks for joining us. This has been an excellent conversation about Blade Runner. I hope we can continue this discussion another time. And in the minute we have left, last words about Blade Runner.
Well, I would like to say that, you know, when Shakespeare did his plays, you know, he would rewrite them, you know, based on feedback from the audience. Whereas we got to see this with Blade Runner, you know, in a movie that actually happened, where they got feedback from the audience, they realized what didn't work, they took it out, they fixed what was wrong.
About the home video audience?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm saying, you know, this woman, she said, I'm going to see Blade Runner, I'm going to see it for the first time, and I'm going to see the final cut. And this other person that knew her said, oh, how I envy you. Because you get to see it, you know, the way we wish we had seen it initially when it first came out, where they fixed the problems with it.
And so on that note, this has been Tyler Smith and Josh Golding talking about Blade Runner. If you haven't seen the film,
absolutely see it.
What is wrong with you? Go out and rent it right now. So you're in for a treat. Thanks a lot.